Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, unpack them, and pull out the core knowledge, the really key insights, just for you.
Exactly. And today we're diving into, well, it's a core part of MMA, isn't it? Ground and pound.
Right. You sent us Mark Hatmaker's MMA Mastery, Ground and Pound.
Yep. And our goal here is to really get into the principles, the main techniques, and, the strategic value Hatmaker lays out.
Because it's easy to just picture, like, brute force, maybe. But Hatmaker really argues it's much more technical than that.
Definitely. It's strategic. And it's worth remembering, wasn't Mark Coleman kind of the pioneer here back in the early UFC days?
Yeah, exactly. Using that wrestling to get guys down and then just unleash.
Which brings us to the big question you wanted us to tackle. Is ground and pound, seen as intellectually up there with submissions? And what does the actual data say about how effective it is?
Okay, yeah, let's get right into that perception thing. Because there is this feeling, isn't there, that a really slick submission is somehow smarter, more skillful than pounding someone out on the ground.
Well, it makes a certain kind of sense, right? Hatmaker points this out. Hitting someone, grabbing them, that feels almost instinctive.
Like a natural reaction.
Yeah, but submissions, those are clearly learned moves. You have to drill them, understand the mechanics, apply them under duress. They don't just happen.
Totally. You see a perfect armbar, a tight choke.
Yeah.
There's this instant, wow, that took skill. So fighters known for that submission game get huge respect. And, I mean, deservedly so.
But here's Hatmaker's counter-argument, and it's pretty compelling. He's saying, look, the top guys using ground and pound more now. It's not because they can't do submissions.
Right. These fighters are incredibly well-rounded now.
More than ever. He thinks it's actually a conscious, strategic decision. They choose ground and pound. And he uses data to challenge that whole perception.
Ah, the data. This is where it's really interesting, moving past just feelings. He talks about fight metrics, referencing another of his books.
Yeah, and what's cool here is it's an attempt to actually quantify what works. Looking at real fights, high-level fights, and seeing the outcomes, it shifts the debate,
Okay, so what did the numbers show? He looked at a lot of fights, right?
Yeah.
640 UFC and PFC bouts.
Mm-hmm. And the raw finishers were 114 by ground and pound, 187 by submission.
So first glance, you might think, okay, submissions are more frequent finishers.
But, and this is the key point, Hatmaker hammers home, you have to look at how those submissions happened. He claims something like 75% of them.
Wow, 3/4.
Yeah, about 140 of those 187 subs were basically set up by ground and pound first. The strikes did the damage, created the opening, maybe forced a bad move.
Made the submission possible in the first place.
Exactly. He argues that without those preceding strikes, a lot of those submission attempts probably would have just failed against a fresh, undamaged opponent.
That makes a lot of sense. The strikes weaken them, make them desperate. Maybe they expose their neck or arm trying to defend.
Right. And he even notes, watching many fights that did end in a submission, it often felt like just a few more good shots could have ended it right there anyway, maybe even faster.
Okay, so if ground and pound is setting up so many submissions, how does he adjust the numbers?
He proposes this utility score. It's a way to account for that setup role. If you take just half of those submission wins that were set up by strikes, say roughly 93 fights, and add them to the direct ground and pound finishes.
So 114 plus about 93.
You get around 207 for ground and pound's utility compared to the 187 for submissions.
Whoa, okay, that completely flips the script.
It does. The takeaway isn't just about direct finishes. It's that ground and pound is this massive enabling factor for other finishes too. It suggests its strategic importance is way higher than just counting the KOs.
That really changes how you watch a fight, doesn't it? Thinking about the damage accumulating, not just the final move.
Totally. And it's not just stats. Hatmaker also gets practical, talking about training time, the time constraint barrier, he calls it, and this idea of sweat equity.
Yeah, the reality check. There are just so many techniques in martial arts. You physically cannot master everything.
You just can't.
So you have to choose where you put your hours.
And he uses this great analogy like a quick grocery run. You're rushed. What do you grab?
The essentials. Milk, bread, eggs, the staples.
Exactly, the high-yield stuff. And he argues in MMA training, you should focus on the techniques that give you reliable, repeatable results, your training staples.
And he puts ground and pound firmly in that category. Like the jab in boxing, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Foundational, versatile, effective.
Precisely. Then there's sweat equity, the effort, the grind, both physical and mental, you pour into training.
Right.
His point is, ground and pound, while definitely hard work, might give you a better return on that invested effort compared to, say, mastering a really complex submission system that maybe only works in specific situations against certain opponents.
More bang for your training buck, essentially.
Pretty much. You might achieve fight-ending effectiveness more efficiently.
Okay, so from a practical training standpoint, factoring in limited time and wanting the most effective tools, both the numbers and the sufficiency argument point towards giving ground and pound maybe more weight than it traditionally gets.
But, and this is crucial, he stresses that effective ground and pound isn't automatic. It absolutely depends on having strong grounding skills first.
Ground before pound. It's right
Yep.
there in the title.
Yep. You can't just fall on top of someone and expect to rain down effective shots.
You need control.
Total control. And he says the fight data backs this up. Sloppy control on the ground almost always means ineffective striking. You got to pin them down, pressure them, stop them moving freely before you can really unload.
He uses some great examples, right? Matt Hughes.
Perfect examples. Hughes beating Carlos Newton, beating Royce Gracie. Hughes was a master wrestler. His priority was always dominate the position, apply that crushing pressure, then start the pounding.
Physician before submission.
Ah.
Or striking, in this case.
Exactly. And he breaks down that grounding control into two main types, pinning and riding.
Okay, pinning sounds straightforward, like in wrestling.
It is. You're trying to literally freeze the opponent, hold them static. But, as Hatmaker points out, that takes a ton of energy.
Yeah.
Constant force against resistance.
Yeah, you see wrestlers gas out trying to maintain a pin.
Right.
Riding, though, is different. It's about staying on top, maintaining dominance, but through fluidity. You're reading their movements, adjusting, flowing with them, rather than trying to clamp them down rigidly.
He uses that rodeo analogy, doesn't he? Like riding a bull.
Yeah, you're not trying to stop the bullbucking. You're staying balanced, centered, moving with it while it tires itself out. You let them burn energy, fighting your control while you conserve yours.
That makes sense. And a big plus for riding, he says, is being hands-free.
Huge advantage. Because your hips, your core, your body weight are doing the controlling, your hands and arms are often free to strike.
Ah, so you can control and damage simultaneously. Exactly. And those strikes, even if they aren't knockout blows immediately, they soften the opponent up, discourage them, limit their escape options even more. It compounds the problem for the person on the bottom.
Okay, so riding is key for efficient control and setting up strikes. How does Hatmaker break down how to ride effectively? He gets into some specific principles like the sternal arrow.
Yeah, it's quite detailed. He uses the sternum, that flat bone in your chest, as a sort of directional pointer.
Like a compass needle?
Kind of. When you're on top, that sternal arrow needs to be pointing right at your opponent's center of mass. If it's angled off, you're probably leaking pressure, not applying maximum control, and you're easier to reverse.
There's a constant check. Where's my sternum pointing?
Pretty much. It dictates your pressure and alignment. Then there's the axiom. Use the man, not the mat. Meaning, put your weight on your opponent, not on the floor. If your knees, elbows, hips are just resting on the mat unnecessarily, you're supporting yourself. You want them carrying your weight as much as possible, making them miserable.
Got it. Maximize the load on them.
Right. And then he gets really specific with this idea of bisecting the opponent in 3 dimensions.
Okay, length, width, and height. Sounds almost geometric.
It kind of is. Lengthwise is about controlling them along their spine, sort of head to toe, keeping your center just below their sternal arrow.
Okay.
Widthwise is controlling side to side, making sure your center line doesn't drift across theirs. And height-wise, crucially, is keeping your hips lower than the midpoint between their body and the mat, getting your hips down low.
So you're essentially trying to control them along all 3 axes, like putting them in a box you control.
That's a good way to think about it. By controlling these dimensions, you drastically limit their movement options. And he really emphasizes getting those hips low the height bisection as key for heavy pressure.
It's often overlooked. Maybe people focus on staying tight side to side or head to head.
Very much so. And the final piece is unifying the bisections.
Which means
Basically actively driving your hips in an aggressive hip-in, he calls it. So you're intersecting 2 of those planes of control at once. Height and width or height and length.
really locking it down by combining controls.
Exactly. It maximizes pressure, makes escape incredibly difficult, and opens up those striking opportunities because they're so focused on just surviving the pressure.
Man, that's way more detailed than just get on top and hit them. There's real technique there. So how does he suggest training all this? There's a whole continuum, right?
Yeah, a step-by-step progression. It starts super basic.
Yeah.
Just Holding static positions, get the feel, the alignment, build muscle memory for those key control points.
Step 1, position in isolation. Makes sense.
Step 2 is no destination riding, just flowing, moving, staying on top without stopping in one spot, building that specific cardio and fluidity.
That sounds exhausting.
Oh, it is. But the idea is it's way more exhausting for the person underneath carrying your weight and fighting constant movement.
Good point. Okay, what's next?
Then riding to destinations. So now you combine the flow with settling into specific holds. Move fluidly, then lock down side control or mount or north-south.
Okay, connecting the movement and the positions.
Mhm.
Then the striking comes in.
Yep. Step 4 is static destination pounding. Practice hitting from those solid lockdown positions you just learned to reach. Make sure you can generate power without losing control.
Right. Don't get wild and give up position just to land a punch.
Exactly. Then step 5 integrates movement to the pounding. Ride to destination pounding. Flow, secure the spot, then strike.
Getting closer to the real thing.
Then no destination pounding, which is striking while you're still moving, still riding, maintaining that active control. That's tough.
I bet. And the final step?
Is just ground and pound. Putting it all together, the movement, the positional control, the transitions, the striking, all flowing seamlessly.
It's a really logical buildup. Start simple, adds layers.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It really highlights that ground and pound isn't one thing, it's this whole integrated system of skills.
So, wrapping up our deep dive into Hatmaker's MMA Mastery ground and pound, it's clear it's way more than just mindless aggression, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's technical, it's strategic, and the data he presents makes a strong case that it's not just effective for finishing fights directly.
But it's also hugely important for setting up other finishes, like submissions. Its overall value might be much higher than we often think.
And we saw how crucial those grounding skills are, that ground before pound idea. Understanding riding, using the sternal arrow, bisecting the opponent. These are key technical details.
Yeah, use the man, not the mat. That sticks with you.
For sure. And the structured training approach makes sense too.
It really challenges that old hierarchy. The idea that submissions are inherently the higher art. Hatmaker's work really pushes you to appreciate the skill and strategic depth of ground and pound.
Which leads us to our final thought for you listening. Given this perspective, the data, the principles, how should a fighter best structure their training for a well-rounded MMA game?
Yeah, does the traditional heavy focus on submissions maybe need a rethink? Should ground and pound, given its effectiveness and utility, get more dedicated development time?
Something to chew on, definitely. How do you balance developing these powerful, high-utility striking tools on the ground with the undeniable importance of submission offense and defense? Where's the optimal balance?
A great question to consider as you watch the fights or even think about training.